What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my early thoughts ahead of the Game Week 5 deadline. So I'm going to talk about the Salah to Haaland switch, which a lot of people are talking about right now. What to do with Watkins, Wirtz and Semenyo. Talk through my team and go through some other notes I've made for this weekend. So let's get into it. So let's start with what feels like the big talking point this week, and that's whether or not to sell Mo Salah to Erling Haaland. Now, for most people, if you're going to make that move, it's not going to be until Game Week 6. In fact, I think making that move this week makes zero sense. Salah's got Everton at home. Yes, I know it's the early kickoff, but Haaland's got Arsenal away. That's a really tough fixture. Arsenal defence is just so good. I would expect the returns for Haaland this week to be quite limited. So if you're going to do it, it's going to be Game Week 6. But I think it's worth talking about now, because whether or not you're going to make that move might impact what you do in Game Week 5. For example, some of you might have been thinking about free hitting in Game Week 6. Now you might just use transfers to get Haaland. That will change what you do this week. So it's worth considering whether you want to make the move next week right now. Short summary, I think the move is fine, purely because of fixtures. You look at 6 and 7, Salah's got Palace away, Chelsea away, and Haaland's got Burnley at home, Brentford away. Haaland is clearly the better captain. You could even argue that Haaland is worth triple captaining against Burnley in Game Week 6 to get that chip used when you know he's fully fit and when he's firing and getting tons of chances and stuff like that. For what it's worth, I would not panic about triple captain in 6 though. If you want a wild card instead, that is absolutely fine. You will have opportunities later on to use your triple captain on Salah or Haaland in really good fixtures later on. I've seen some people consider wild card 5 just to be able to triple captain 6. I just wouldn't do that. I was going to say I think that's mad. I won't go that far, but I wouldn't do it. Primarily because you're going to want Arsenal and City players from 6 onwards, and they play each other in 5. So they're not that valuable in Game Week 5 specifically. So triple captain in 6 is good, but there will be opportunities to use it later on. So don't panic too much about that. I will say this. I think we've got to be careful about not over-exaggerating the 2 players. I think right now the narrative is starting to become that you have to make this move in Game Week 6 because Salah is done as an option and Haaland just looks absolutely essential. And to be fair, when you look at the numbers so far this season, it does feel like that. Salah's running at 0.08 non-penalty expected goals per 90, which is awful, especially for him, and 0.13 expected assists. Haaland, 1.5 non-penalty expected goals per 90. Absolutely insane. So looking at that, you should definitely make the swap. But it's only a 4-game sample size. The reality is, Salah's numbers will probably come up and Haaland's numbers will probably come down a little bit over the next kind of 5, 10, 15 game weeks. Because we know Salah is better than that. And we know that Haaland doesn't usually run that high. So I think the move is good, but I think this narrative that it's absolutely essential to do is not necessarily correct. Like if you still wanted to free hit Haaland in and then keep Salah after that, I think it's fine. Because after Game Week 7, you can make an argument that Salah is just as good a captain. Like in Game Week 8, Salah's got Man United at home. In Game Week 8 for Haaland, it's Everton at home. If you had Haaland, not Salah, you wouldn't be panicking. You would just captain Haaland against Everton. But honestly, you could argue that Salah against Man United is better. Game Week 9, Brentford away for Salah versus Villa away for Haaland. Again, I'd probably say on paper Salah's better, albeit Villa are not playing that well right now. But Game Week 9 is a little far away. And then Game Week 10, Villa at home for Salah or Bournemouth at home for Haaland. Right now, I'd probably rather not play Bournemouth. So I think 8 to 10, the captaincy is pretty close. But you could make an argument, like I said, that Salah is slightly better. So it's only really 6 and 7 where I think Haaland is definitely better, is what I'm trying to say. So you could just free hit 6, get him for Burnley, and then have Salah after that if you've still got faith in him. I mean, this time last season, Haaland was also running really high in terms of chances. If you remember he had like 9 goals after 5 game weeks. But what happened after that was a massive drop-off. And actually, if you kept Haaland and didn't go to Salah, you probably had a pretty rough kind of 5 to 10 game weeks because Salah absolutely smashed it. So things can change around pretty quickly. The main difference I would say for this season is Rodri's back for Man City. Hopefully he's not going to go and get injured. So I think that's a big plus for Man City in general, plus Haaland. But also, last year was a bit of an anomaly where Salah smashed the record. He's not going to do that again. I said that in pre-season, right? Salah will still be good this year. He'll get over 200 points, I'm almost certain. But he's not going to go and smash that record again. So the points between them will be a lot closer. So I think for that reason, I quite like the Haaland switch. The other reason I like it is because cheap midfielders just look better than cheap forwards. That might not always be the case, but right now I think it is. Like once you go from Evan Nielsen's price at 7 million to below, I don't really like any of the forwards. Like Strand Larsen, if he can get fit and stay fit, has got really good fixtures. And at 6.4 million, he's great. And Thiago, maybe for Brentford, if he's going to play close to 90 most weeks and take penalties, could be really good as well. But outside of that, like who are you buying? Like around 5.5 to 6 million, there's so many better midfielders. Even below, like you got like Dewsbury Hall and Stack at 5 million for midfielders. You don't have that for the forwards. So the switch from Salah to Haaland just also seems quite nice for that reason. So I think it's a good switch. But I think this idea that Salah's just not going to get any points is just crazy. And I know he's been bailed out a little bit by last-minute assists and penalties and stuff, but he will just end up getting other points elsewhere. Like we've seen enough from this guy in the past to know it will happen. And also, I was reminded on Twitter this morning of what happened with Mbeumo last year. So if you played the game last year, a lot of us got Mbeumo early, and it almost became a meme every game week about whether or not he would even take a shot, let alone getting goals and assists. He just wasn't even shooting at one point. He went like 4 or 5 game weeks with one shot, and then lots of people sold him. Then he absolutely smashed it. Why? Because he's a quality player, and we've seen him score plenty of goals and assists, you know, in previous seasons. Same with Salah. So although he's not getting many chances right now, and maybe Liverpool are struggling to adapt to the new setup with Wirtz, Kirkes, etc., eventually this guy will score. He's just too good not to. So that's a very long way of saying I think Salah to Haaland is fine, but let's temper our expectations a bit. Haaland could have a little bit of a dip, and Salah will probably start doing better soon. And ultimately, what I would say is, long term, you might want both, especially from game week 12, 13 onwards, because the fixtures are really good for both of them. So maybe consider that as well. But yeah, I think free hit 6 is fine. I think Salah to Haaland in 6 is fine. I think triple captain Haaland's fine. I think wildcard 6 is fine. Either way, most of us, one way or another, we want him for Burnley at home, and we're going to captain him. So let's talk about Ollie Watkins again. I feel like he comes up in every single one of these early thoughts videos so far this season. He's dropped in price overnight from 8.9 to 8.8 million. So if you are someone with Watkins in your squad and you've been stressing about that price drop, it's happened now. So at least you can stop thinking about it. He's unlikely to get another price drop before the game week 5 deadline. Let the Champions League matches play out, then decide what you want to do with him once you've had the press conference information. I think if I still owned him, I would lean towards keeping him for game week 5. Because despite the start to the season Sunderland have had, which is pretty good, right? I think slightly better than most of us expected. I still see that as a good fixture on paper. And I know that Villa haven't scored any goals. And even their expected goals is not that great this season. They're in the bottom 5 for kind of chances generated. We all expect them to turn it around, I think. And if they're going to do it, it's when they've got Sunderland away, Fulham at home, Burnley at home, next 3 game weeks. The other reason I would probably lean towards keeping Watkins is I'm not even sure who you would sell him for. I think in general, game week 5 is a good week to not do anything too rash. Because when you look at the forward options, you're probably not going to buy Ekitike. Early kickoff, maybe Isak gets some minutes in that game. Even without Isak, Ekitike keeps getting subbed early. I don't think anyone wants to buy Welbeck. You can't buy Richarlison, he just got benched. No one's buying a Burnley forward. Chris Wood, maybe. But after game weeks 5 and 6, Chris Wood is probably a sell. So I think the next 3 game weeks, actually, Villa's fixtures are probably just as good, if not slightly better than what Forest have. No one's buying Fulkrug or Wilson. I don't think anyone's buying Mateta right now. Strand Larsen, maybe if he's fit, but even then you're going to have slight doubts about him. Nobody wants Šeško. Maybe João Pedro. But are we now saying João Pedro against Man United away is worth a transfer when Watkins has got Sunderland away? I don't think so. I get form, etc., but I don't buy that. It's not what I would do. Muniz, no. Thiago, probably not. Evan Nielsen's not bad. But again, if I was free hitting this week, I would choose Watkins over Evan Nielsen. So for me, it's not worth a transfer, etc. Right? You get the point. Gyökeres, maybe. Could you make an argument that Gyökeres nailed on penalties against City when he's at home is better than Watkins? I mean, maybe, but I wouldn't make that switch, right? You get the point. So at this stage, it's not even that I would be keeping Watkins because I think he's amazing. I just think this week is not a great week to make the switch. And actually, as someone that's looked at a free hit draft for game week 6, there is a chance Watkins would make the team. Because in game week 6, there's not a huge amount of other amazing options. I'm not going to go through every single team again, right? João Pedro potentially better against Brighton at home, but Mateta's got Palace. Evan Nilsson's away to Leeds, and Leeds have done okay defensively. You know, Haaland's obviously amazing, but the difference in price is massive. Maybe you sell Watkins to Haaland in game week 6. Chris Wood maybe is probably better as well. But maybe it's a case that we see the next game and Wood's minutes are just not going to be as good under Ange. We just don't know. So I think Watkins is actually not that bad for game week 6 either versus the alternatives. So I would keep him. I know it's frustrating and it's not nice to lose team value. It's rubbish. And you know if he blanks again against Sunderland, he'll probably drop in price ahead of Fulham. Like, it's a super annoying situation. But I think because of the reasons I've just mentioned, I think you've got to keep him. And I think it's probably the same for Rodgers. I think there's probably a few more midfielder alternatives you could look at that are slightly better than the Watkins options in forwards. Even then, I think I would probably keep both. I think I would value having that transfer more right now. So let's talk about Florian Wirtz next. And it feels like deja vu. Another game week, another blank for him. And he's averaged 84 minutes per start. So to have those first 4 fixtures and not pick up a single goal or assist is super frustrating. He's already dropped to 8.4 million since the start of the season. And to be honest with you, he's probably going to drop to 8.3 before the deadline. So if you are absolutely certain you want to sell Wirtz this week, I would maybe do it before that price drop. If you're not sure whether you want to sell him or who to sell him to, then I would just eat the price drop, right? Team value is important, but so is making the best decision. So if you're absolutely sure you need to sell him, then do it. Otherwise, wait a little bit longer and give yourself more thinking time, more information and stuff like that. Ultimately, forgetting about price drops, I think he's okay to keep this week because it's Everton at home. But I do think there's options you could go and buy that are slightly better in midfield than there maybe are, like I said, with the forward options for Watkins. So, for example, if you wanted to go and buy Antoine Semenyo, I think that's a perfectly reasonable transfer because Wirtz might go down, Semenyo might go up this week. And to be honest, look, is Newcastle at home much better than Everton at home? Probably not. But we know how good Semenyo has been so far. The prices are only going in one direction for the two players. And if Kluivert can't get back in the team, Semenyo's going to take penalties. And he's got Leeds away in game week 6, which is better than Wirtz against Palace away. What will be interesting with Wirtz is, and obviously we don't know until we see more matches, is what happens with his minutes once Champions League starts. For what it's worth, I think he's pretty much nailed in that team still. Obviously, if Bradley or Frimpong come back into right back, Szoboszlai has to go somewhere. So maybe one of Wirtz, Szoboszlai or McAllister misses out. I don't think it's going to be Wirtz. But there is a possibility that with Champions League, he gets rested at some point. And it's not guaranteed that it would be in Europe. Like, could he start this midweek and then not start against Everton? Potentially. Now, I don't want to scaremonger people. If you're asking me right now to predict the Liverpool 11, Wirtz is 100% in there. But I can't guarantee it, obviously, because we haven't seen enough matches with him in a Liverpool shirt. So I think he's okay to keep this week, but I think it's also okay to sell. And I think from 6 onwards, I just wouldn't be that interested. I've still got faith in him, right? He's playing number 10 for Liverpool. The returns will come, right? We know he's a quality player, and the fixtures between 8 to kind of 12 are pretty decent. But because of 6 and 7, I'd probably start thinking about getting rid of him soon. So he's okay to keep this week. But I think at this stage, if you've had enough and you want to sell him, absolutely fine. So speaking of Antoine Semenyo, another 350,000 transfers in for him so far this week and counting. I wouldn't be surprised if that's pushing 500k by the time we get to the game week 5 deadline. He's now up to 38.4% overall ownership. And at 7.5 million, he looks like a really good pick. I don't think that price makes him essential. And so if you've got other plans this week and you can't buy Semenyo, I think that's fine. But if you need a new midfielder, I would strongly look at him. And I think while Bournemouth are playing well and while Kluivert cannot get back into the team, it just makes Semenyo better after taking that penalty this weekend. Because if he's going to be next in line and Kluivert's mostly going to be on the bench and only getting kind of 15, 20 minutes, there's a lot of game time where if Bournemouth get a penalty, Semenyo's probably going to take it. I still wouldn't completely rule out Evan Nilsson taking one if Kluivert's not on the pitch. But the fact that Semenyo's just taken and scored means he's very, very likely to take the next one. And for 7.5 million, that looks pretty good. I've seen some comparisons to him versus Mbeumo from last year. And I don't think it's quite the same because Mbeumo was first choice no matter who was on the pitch in terms of penalties. And he was a bit cheaper. But Semenyo is pushing that way. He's the kind of player you can just play in most games. I wouldn't say he's fixture proof. I don't believe that's a thing, right? There are fixtures that are just difficult for any player. But there's not too many bad ones coming up. Like, you could argue Newcastle at home is not easy in 5. Leeds away in 6 is not easy either. Neither even is Fulham in 7. But as a fixture run for the next 5, Newcastle at home, Leeds away, Fulham at home, Palace away, Forest at home, it looks fine to me. And he plays 90 every single week. And even without penalties, he's got that goal threat. I just think he's a really good pick. And I don't think there's many better options below his price. You've always got to take price into account. You might need the money to make another move. That's fair enough. But at 7.5 and below, it's really difficult to pick out someone that's better. So if you need a new midfielder, I would strongly consider him this week. So just some other quick notes from the weekend. For Arsenal, Eze started ahead of Martinelli. He currently costs 7.5 million. Obviously encouraging that Mikel Arteta is happy to use him in that role off the left. And he could be a really good option from game week 7 onwards when Arsenal's fixtures get really good. I don't think there's a need to rush into them for Man City at home and Newcastle away, unless you're wildcarding, in which case you want to set up for the future. But definitely one to monitor. But I will say, for 7.5, I would much rather buy Semenyo right now. Unless you're looking for a massive differential, I think Semenyo is the better pick. Because, again, a bit like with Wirtz, we don't have any info to go on with Eze in an Arsenal shirt. What happens with Champions League games? How many minutes does he get? Does he continue to get subbed early? Is there the odd game where he might get benched? There is a lot of unknowns there. So I like the potential, but I wouldn't rush into it. No Saliba, but it doesn't sound like the injury is bad. He could even be back for the next game. And Odegaard also went off with an injury, but apparently, again, is not that bad. It'd be interesting to see what happened if Odegaard was out. Would they just play Marino, Rice, and Zubimendi all the time, or would Eze come central and Martinelli come in? One to monitor. For Newcastle, Voltemada started and scored. He came off around 70 minutes. Again, I wouldn't rush into that because it's Bournemouth away this week, which is not easy. And then they play Arsenal in game week 6. So one to monitor. Visser, apparently, I don't think this has been confirmed by Eddie Howe or Newcastle yet, but I've seen a few journalists say that he's out for 4 to 6 weeks. Now, that is quite a long time, but you've got an international break as part of that. So you've got 3 game weeks, then 2 weeks off for an international break. That's already 5, like kind of 4 or 5 game weeks. And so that might be competition for Voltemada longer term. So for that reason, I'd probably just ignore Voltemada. You've got Bournemouth away, Arsenal at home. And then game week 7, I actually can't remember what that is. That is Forest at home, which is fine. But then you've got the break. I think when Visser's fit, I think he'll get a lot of minutes. So I'd probably ignore Voltemada for now. But for his price, worth keeping an eye on. Spurs, Xavi Simons straight into the 11. Basically started left wing. Now, I know he's not a traditional winger. He did come inside quite a lot. But on paper, that was his position. Interesting to not see him central. I think that's where he'll end up. And maybe he'll be a bit more effective there. But he did pick up an assist. And he did take corners off of Porro. So Kudus from one side, Xavi Simons from the other. I think he's a good bet for 7 million. I think, again, I can't guarantee you he will start every game. But I'd be surprised if he's not in the 11 way more often than he isn't. And I think for most Premier League games, he probably will start. But there will be some early subs there. Richarlison bench. His minutes aren't secure. I don't know what else to say. If you've got Richarlison, you've got this worry all the time. They've got other players they can play, and also he's just not that durable. Like he cannot play weekend, midweek, weekend for very long without getting injured, and so they will just manage him. So if you've got him, I wouldn't necessarily rush out to buy him. He could play Champions League and then still play against Brighton. But I would not be buying him, and long term, I'd have a plan to maybe get rid. For Chelsea, interestingly, João Pedro apparently wasn't 100%, and he still got played. And Guiu wasn't even in the squad. So if you've got if you were thinking that maybe now Guiu's back to Chelsea, and Maresca's saying he's the only number 9 they've got, and you were thinking he might get really good minutes, I think that shows that he won't. João Pedro literally told Maresca, according to Maresca, that he wasn't 100%, and he still didn't even put Guiu in the squad. So Guiu will get some minutes. I think for 4.4 million, if you don't want 3 other Chelsea players, he's probably fine to have on your bench as third sub, but he ain't going to play that much. And Palmer's back, one to consider. Man United away this week. I mean, after Man United's performance against Man City, you could say that's a good fixture. But I would say away to Man City is more difficult, obviously, than playing at home. So I wouldn't rush out and get Palmer this week, but he's one to monitor from game week 6, or let's just say 5, 6 onwards. We know what he can do. He had lots of shots when he came off the bench against Brentford. He's a good player, right? What's new, right? We already kind of had an idea of that. One thing to, again, I've said this a lot now, but one thing to monitor with Palmer is his minutes over the next couple of games. This is why I want to wait until game week 6 onwards to think about him, because Maresca said that he was recovering from injury. It wasn't about managing him, which is why he didn't start, etc., because he was recovering. But then he did say maybe they need to manage him because he has had a few issues. And they're not going to be able to rest him in Europe as much as they sometimes did last year because it's Champions League now. So I'm really interested to see how many minutes he gets. I think it's away to Bayern this week. And then how many minutes he gets against Man United in Game Week 5. If he does back-to-back 90s or back-to-back 80+, then I think things look really good for him moving forward. I think I would want him from Game Week 6, if not, definitely Game Week 9. And I guess the point here is start thinking about how you might get him in. Because for me, I know if I sell Salah to Haaland, not only do I want to get Salah back at some point, but I probably want to get Palmer back in Game Week 9 as well. So lots of things to consider, lots of transfers going to be needed. Think about that for your own team. So I just want to weigh in with some early thoughts about my own team ahead of Game Week 5. I've literally just wildcarded in Game Week 4, a very late decision on Friday night to do that. So things should be pretty straightforward this week. Right now, the plan is to bench boost. That is currently active. And to roll the transfer. So my bench is Dubravka against Forest at home, Senesi against Newcastle at home, Goodmanson against Wolves away for Leeds, and then Dewsbury Hall against Liverpool away. You could make an argument that I should play Dubravka instead of David Raya, but I think if I had this team without bench boost available, I'm pretty sure I would play the Arsenal man. I fully back the Arsenal defence, and also I quite like that I don't have Haaland, so it's another kind of bet against him as well. So Dubravka on the bench, Senesi against Newcastle, that's going to be a tough game. Not quite sure about the clean sheet there, but he is very, very good for defensive contributions. So I'm hoping he'll get me 4 minimum. Anything more than that, definitely happy with it. Goodmanson, I ended up going with basically just to keep money out of that position. At one point, I had like Matoma in midfield and Munoz in defence because I've actually got 0.7 million in the bank with this draft. But I just went with Goodmanson so I could have Semenyo and Evan Nielsen. I didn't want to drop either of those players. And maybe that money will come in handy for future weeks. I think Leeds' defence over the season will be stronger than Burnley as well. And if Strand-Larsen is out for Wolves, who knows? Maybe I even get a clean sheet there. Dewsbury Hall on the bench is not great. Liverpool away. I could have picked a different midfielder there. I could have gone for Reinders, by the way, with the money in the bank. But he would have had Arsenal away this week anyway. I could have gone for Stack at Leeds, but I just felt long-term, 6 onwards, I just prefer Dewsbury Hall to Stack. Simple as that. And so I'm prepared to slightly weaken my bench boost to have a player that I'm happier with for the long term. I mean, is that a great bench? Not really. But am I going to have a massively better one later on? Probably not. I'd rather just get a use and I can just forget about it. I've wildcarded it with the intention to bench boost, so that's the plan. And then roll the transfer and decide what to do in Game Week 6. Whether to free hit Haaland in or just transfer him in. If I transfer him in, I will almost certainly sell Salah and Mateta. Salah to Reinders, maybe Njai, and then Mateta up to Haaland. I think in Game Week 6, Palace play Liverpool at home, so it's not a bad exit point for Mateta. And I've inadvertently made a team that's actually quite good for Game Week 6. Like if I go on the My Team tool for Game Week 6 and you look at my team, I just optimize it to get the proper bench in place. Like, Raya in goal's fine. It's Newcastle away, it's not easy, but I never mind playing Raya. Van Dijk against Palace away, Lacroix against Liverpool at home, Senesi against Leeds away. And also, if I sell Salah in Game Week 6, then I'm betting against the Liverpool attack completely. So I probably would play Lacroix, who's also good for defensive contributions. Semenyo and Evan Nielsen against Leeds, Fernandes against Brentford. Like I said, Mateta would get sold. Dewsbury Hall, West Ham at home, and Gyökeres, Newcastle away. If I free hit that week, I will make 8-9 changes, but I don't know if there's a lot of upgrades there. So I might just not do that. I might just make the transfers rather than free hit. But I think the beauty of wildcarding is I don't have to make the decision this week like a lot of people might have to. I can just roll, hopefully, and then in Game Week 6 decide whether to free hit or not. Because obviously we can roll transfers through the free hit now. What I haven't done this week, so basically at the bottom, I've set my bench boost to Game Week 5. And I've left free hit spare, so for my chip strategy. I'm going to see what my AI transfers are, because I've not checked this yet. Hopefully it just says to roll. Yeah, okay, I should save my transfer. That's what I want to do. If you want to check your suggested transfers, there's a link in the description below, 50% off at the moment. If you're not sure what to do this week, you could get a second opinion. But that's me. Roll, bench boost, fingers crossed I don't get an injury, because that would be super annoying. I'm pretty happy with how the team looks. No major changes I need to make. If there was one thing I'd maybe change on wildcard, by the way, it's getting Gabriel. Because I think I really will want him Game Week 7 onwards. And also, they're playing West Ham. If you watch the Spurs-West Ham game, West Ham cannot defend corners. Do you know who's very, very good at corners? Arsenal and Gabriel. So I'm a little bit worried about him, but without taking you through the next 10 game weeks, this defence I've got, Lacroix, Anderson, Van Dijk, Senesi, 4 centre-backs, by the way. That is the new world we're in with FPL. And Goodmanson, it does rotate pretty nicely for a lot of game weeks, like the next 10 or so. Not perfectly. There are some game weeks where I've got to play a slightly subpar option, like Lacroix against Liverpool, for example. But it's not enough that I need transfers. So as long as they can stay fit, it looks good. Anyway, I'm 5 minutes and I'm rolling and bench boosting. I'm sorry for that. Make sure to give it a like if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button. Check out Fantasy Football Hub using the links in the description below. I'll catch you again tomorrow for another video. Bye.